It will probably not be a surprise to hear that when it comes to teaching about unions and the labor movement, Alabama is failing its young people.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
So Adam, everybody knows, is a former history teacher in the Alabama public schools. And so he has a pretty, a pretty good insight as to what is taught in Alabama, with respect to the history curriculum and with respect to labor history. So Adam, can you talk to us about what is taught in Alabama public schools as it relates to unions, to labor, working people, things like that?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty appropriate, given the interview we just had with Kim Kelly about the untold stories of our labor history, that we take a look at Alabama school systems and what do Alabama students actually get taught, what are they exposed to in terms of our history of a labor movement here in this state. So if you're a regular listener to this show, then you already know the importance of the labor movement and the history of our state and our country. You know how labor struggles intersected with other struggles against oppression and exploitation. And you know how the labor struggles of the past shape our present and future struggle to fulfill the American promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But do you think the average Alabama student, or adult for that matter, share this knowledge? It will probably not be a surprise to hear that when it comes to teaching about unions and the labor movement, Alabama is failing its young people. And I know that to be true based on my own experiences as a public school student and a public school teacher here in Alabama, as well as my time as a labor and community activist. You know, I know how many times I've encountered graduating seniors who don't even know what a union is. But I wanted to look at the facts. So I took a look back at the Alabama Social Studies course of study and standards. This is what teachers are required to teach in our state. Any public school in the state, if you're teaching social studies, this is your guiding framework. So I'm going to quote from the document here. The 2010 Alabama Course of Study, Social Studies, provides Alabama students and teachers with a curriculum that contains content designed to promote competence in the areas of economics, geography, history, and civics and government. With an emphasis on responsible citizenship, these content areas serve as the 4 organizational strands for the grades K through 12 social studies program. Content in this document focuses on enabling students to become literate, analytical thinkers, capable of making informed decisions about the world and its people, while also preparing them to participate responsibly in society at local, state, national, and international levels. Sounds pretty good, right? But those words ring a little more hollow when you consider the minimal emphasis on unions and the labor movement. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this is a comprehensive analysis here, but I did search the course of study for any mention of words like union and labor, taking a page from the Zen Education Project, who recently did a very similar study of state standards around the teaching of Reconstruction. And for anyone who's particularly interested in Reconstruction or teaching, highly recommend you check that out. Spoiler alert, Alabama did not do very well. So when I looked through 140-odd pages, I only found the word union twice, with the exception of union being used as a reference to the North or the Soviet Union. But in terms of union as in labor union, I literally only found the word twice. And both of those were in the 12th grade economics, and both of which were additional content under the standards, not in the standards themselves. So it doesn't really get much better when you look for labor in Alabama social studies. 6th grade modern U.S. history does ask students to, quote, identify workplace reforms, including the 8-hour workday, child labor laws, and workers' comp laws during the Progressive Era. In 9th grade world history, 1500 to the present, there is one standard that includes, quote, conditions of labor, and, quote, the economic theories of capitalism, liberalism, socialism, and Marxism during the Industrial Revolution. And that's it there. Cut to 11th grade, modern U.S. history. The last U.S. history class most Alabamians will have to ever take in their life. The very first standard actually addresses it. The very first standard is on, quote, the transition of the United States from an agrarian society to an industrial nation prior to World War I. And I am pleased to say it does actually explicitly include some labor history, including events like the Pullman Strike, groups like AFL and IWW, and figures like A. Philip Randolph and Eugene Debs. But again, that's it for the year, the course. So given that, it's really easy to see how students could walk away from their American history classes and walk away from high school. And if they actually know anything about labor unions, it's maybe that they were relevant over 100 years ago. And so just in a couple of minutes, I've basically shared with you the extent of labor history in Alabama's curriculum. Out of over 140 required standards, kindergarten through 12th grade, 140 standards that teachers must teach and that students are expected to learn, maybe 5 could be called labor history. And while other states have actually been debating how to expand and integrate labor history into the curriculum, Alabama appears to be heading into the opposite direction, unfortunately. With the Alabama State Board of Education and the legislature targeting intellectual freedom in the name of manufactured right-wing outrage over inclusiveness and what they're calling CRT, we can anticipate even less of an emphasis on our rich labor movement history. Speaking of which, Alabama has a long, bloody, important, and inspirational labor history. From our own roles in the 1934 textile strike and the 1920s Coal Wars, to the teacher strikes in Walker County and Scottsboro, to the use of state force against striking workers such as rubber workers in the 1990s, to the current landscape of campaigns at the Birmingham Starbucks, the Bessemer Amazon warehouse, and of course the Warrior Met coal strike in Brookwood, now considered Alabama's longest strike. Throughout our history, working-class Alabamians have navigated demographic divisions and government opposition to organize in the workplace, build power for themselves, and fight for their dignity. Now that's what I call active, responsible citizenship.
And I mean, it's so bad. It is such a disservice to the students of Alabama that they don't know, that they know so little about unions and what they do. Because even there is some good stuff. I remember learning about Eugene Debs but even that was kind of in the context of his role as a perennial presidential candidate, as opposed to the significance of the labor work that he did. And even there, it seemed like the emphasis when you learned about labor history was always on, it seemed to me, the great man kind of stuff. You're thinking about this one person. You're thinking about Eugene Debs, as opposed to all of the workers that followed him or led him in some instances. The Pullman strike he was actually opposed to, which is funny because he's kind of conceived of as a leader of the Pullman strike, but he went when the workers and everybody democratically said we're going to go on strike. He was like, okay, I think this is a bad idea, but he put his whole heart into it. But the structure of like, why is it actually that unions have been able to win things? The structure of collective bargaining, logistically, mechanically, how do unions work? The fact that people can come out of, it's the same thing as allowing students to come out of high school without knowing how taxes work, or how to write a check, or how to manage their finances, or things like this. These are things that are materially practicable, right? They're things that people need and have need to know as they navigate through the world. Like, it's important that you know how to bargain, when you're going to a dealership and you don't just buy the first thing, you don't pay the sticker price for a car. And it's important to know that you can get more when you collectively bargain. And
Right.
I don't know, it's very frustrating that they don't even, it's not even that necessarily that they're told the wrong thing about unions, which is that they're bad for workers.
I mean, happens.
Which but
Certainly
at least it's not in the standards. But
Right.
they don't know they don't learn anything mechanically, logistically about how they work, and it's a disservice to it's a disservice to folks.
It is. I mean, especially when you remember that the majority of the state is working class. The majority of the students of the state are working class. They are going to be workers. So it is disappointing that they have such little exposure to their history as workers, as members of the working class. And of course, we're focusing on history here, to tie in with Kim's book. But, on a related note, it's disappointing to see how few students are exposed to trade union apprenticeship programs as an option after high school. There's such an emphasis on college and career readiness.
Right.
Every student has to fill out the FAFSA form now to graduate. They have to fill out that paperwork for college acceptance. They are exposed to military recruiters on a very frequent basis. But it's pretty infrequent that 16, 17, 18-year-old kids actually get to be exposed to apprenticeship programs like the ones we've discussed on this show. Opportunities that really could change their life and the trajectory of their family.
That will give them an income and benefits on par with a 4-year college degree.
Absolutely.
Which is not what you're going to get from non-union apprenticeships.
And,
you're going to get
reaching people that are not going to go to college and where college is not necessarily the right fit. People who, prefer to work with their hands or whatever the situation may be. So we really are doing a disservice to Alabama students. Well, in a lot of ways, but certainly in this respect. And I just wanted to bring that up. And, I mentioned a few instances of important labor history in this state, and something that we want to do more of on this show is go into detail about some of those and share some of these stories about the struggles of our predecessors here in Alabama to fight for a better state and a better country. So stay tuned on that. If you have any particular stories that you're interested in, maybe you were in a strike at some point, or you had parents, grandparents who were involved in different labor struggles here in Alabama, y'all send them our way. Would love the inspiration, would love the information to include in our segments. So, labor history, it's important.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.